Hello there, it's Adam Forbes. I am the host of the Corporate Escapology podcast and the author of, don't forget the book, Corporate Escapology. Today, my guest is Toby Sinclair. He spent 11 years at JP Morgan, before that working various kind of retail, digital roles. But now he has brought all his skills together and all his experiences to build a new tech business, an AI business that is building off his employee experience work that he did at JP Morgan to help individuals, leaders across organizations handle difficult conversations. So they effectively interact with an AI to practice rather than just go and screw up in front of an employee or another stakeholder that they need to manage. And so this is an interesting journey about the dream that many of us have sitting in a dull corporate job of being a tech founder. It was a dream I had myself, so there's lots of really interesting experiences to swap notes on here with Toby, but obviously he's making more of a success of this than I did. So let's meet Toby now. Cool. Well, welcome, Toby. Thanks so much for joining us today on the Corporate Escapology podcast. Great to have you.
Nice to meet you.
Good. Well, let's start with university. I always like to sort of try and ground it in what was your initial choices and expectations. So what did you do? And then how did that influence what you did next to make money?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I just started university at, I guess, a strange time in terms of there'd been the kind of dot-com boom in the 2000. And then I went to university around 2004. So it was at this point where some of these internet companies were starting to come back and these kind of interesting business models of how companies made money. An obvious one at the time are things like eBay, PayPal. And so the course that I did was called e-business, which was this combination of, it was basically like electronic business. I don't think the term is used. I don't think the term's used anymore. It's a bit dated, but at the time it was this combination of technology and business, and was very much based around understanding these businesses like eBay, for example. What's their business model? How do they make money? And for me, and like Amazon's, I guess, another good example. Yeah. And for me, I was always fascinated with the combination of technology and business. Nowadays, obviously, both of them are very much the same thing in a way. But at the time, there was still this very much separation of technology and business. So I was fascinated just at the combination of them. I didn't want to go and do just a purely technical degree. So I wanted something that would combine the two, really.
Yeah, it's so interesting you say that, kind of coming back as well, because I was in it when it really did crash. I had this job with e-business in my title as well.
Oh, right, okay.
Which, I guess got swiftly canned when the dot-com boom ended, but then it came back, of course, like it was going to. So did you then try and get a job in something e-business?
Yeah, so my first role when I graduated was in software testing, which wasn't what I planned to do. And to be honest, it's not the most glamorous of the technology roles for people to do. Often, like, testers are very much seen as the bottom of the food chain, unfortunately. But what I ended up really loving about being a software tester was the problem solving, and also that kind of pressure that came with it of going to tell a senior manager on a Friday when you're supposed to do a change on the Saturday, just found a problem, we can't go live. They were like really like high stakes conversations. And so that kind of ability to sort of deliver difficult news, bad news, I kind of learned really on in my career. And just that whole problem solving and trying to find issues in complex software. And also then that combination of the human side of it is we found something. And sometimes it was news that people didn't want to hear. So just practicing and learning how to do that was really, really. I definitely believe myself as a generalist, this like combination of very different skills. And I am fascinated like at that kind of combination of skill sets, I guess some of the technical things and the human skills, and the combination of them both in interesting contexts and environments is something I've really enjoyed, I think.
Yeah, and it's good you even recognise it, because I think a lot of people don't recognise that. They just think about that sort of technical domain they have, but the things that get things done in companies are not usually about that technical domain. They're all the other things that you do alongside that. And I increasingly find when I'm talking to people that they're the things that are valuable or valued outside. The technical stuff, personally, it's a bit easier to find because it's a bit more specific, but getting somebody can actually do stuff, make things happen, deal with difficult situations, problem solve. These things are things that we kind of pick up in our job, but we don't always give ourselves the credit for. And they're really valuable.
Yeah, 100%. I remember when I think it was as in my first job as a software tester on the graduate program, I got this book, is the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, the Stephen Covey book.
Yeah.
And that was I guess also sort of paved the way, I guess, in terms of being curious about some of these human and sort of meta skills, sort of thinking behind the thinking, and what are the things that help you succeed no matter what environment you're in. So again, I've always been fascinated by, I guess, these kind of meta skills that can help you succeed in many different environments, doing many different things, which I think has really helped me throughout all of my career. And again, going back to the degree, it was, again, probably that thing of, I'm not just thinking about the technology, I'm having to think about its application in business and the different aspects of that. It's been fascinating.
Yeah, cool. So you didn't stay doing the testing though. So what other kind of things did you do during that?
Yeah, so as a software tester, I worked in a few different companies. The main one I spent most of my time in was a retail company in the Northwest. At the time, they owned the catalogue company Littlewoods.
Oh, yeah.
So I remember when I joined them, I remember as a child reading through the Littlewoods catalogue around Christmas time, circling the things that I wanted, telling my parents what I wanted from that. So it was quite cool at the time going to work in that business. And again, that was kind of my first main job at university. So that was 2007, 8. And at the time, that business was predominantly catalogue based.
Yeah.
So I think 50% or so, 56% of the business was done through catalogues. I was there for about 3 or 4 years. By the time I'd left, most of their traffic was actually starting to be on mobile. So there was this really fascinating period of time where they were transitioning away from print selling to desktop selling to mobile. So it was a fascinating period to be in the business, but it was changing. That kind of channel change had happened so quickly in a short period of time.
And that's sort of, I always remember it when you were talking about e-business. It was all this sort of disruption of channels, wasn't it? Cannibalization of channels. And so dealing with something new in a company that is disrupting something that's been existing for a long time and been very successful, that's also kind of an interesting experience to sort of watch that play out, and the personalities and the politics and the stakeholders that are involved in some of these things.
Yeah, it was a fascinating period of time, and just that transition from a print service to desktop to mobile, it was a crazy period. And when I reflect back and I think of the last, say, 10, 15 years, there hasn't been that level of channel disruption. So how we shop now is probably similar to how we were shopping 15 years ago. Obviously, the features have changed, but predominantly nowadays, it's either on your laptop or on your phone. The kind of channel hasn't really changed that dramatically. Even things like tablets were popular at one point, probably less so now. So it was a really fascinating period of time just to experience all of that change in that particular business.
It's a sort of accelerated learning, isn't it, that you get, I think, as well. And that, I often think about that with corporates, that we can easily think from the outside, oh, it's all really boring and kind of slow pace. But actually, the fact that you can move around, it gives you different exposure to things in quite short periods of time. And because it's a bigger company, they're taking a bit more risk on you, maybe not being an expert, in a way that when you hire from outside, you're looking for almost somebody that matches that job description very, very precisely and directly. But inside, you get exposure to quite a lot in quite a short space of time.
100%.
You're looking for it, I think. I mean, there's plenty of people who are just happy with their their job and don't look for it. But the ones that do, there's actually
Yeah.
But you didn't stay. You moved on to do what kind of things?
Yeah, so another role, again, shows some of the diversity at work. It was with the National Trust. So that was another very fascinating business to work in. Lived in sunny Swindon for a year, working there. And yeah, really random work there. So I worked on their property management system. So what I didn't realise is a big part of the National Trust business is managing properties and estates. They have a big rental customers that live in their estates, as well as the people that own the land and stuff. So I had customers there that were like rural surveyors, property managers. So I'm going to work with people that are like, hate technology. They couldn't think of anything worse than logging onto a computer. They just wanted to be out in the wilderness, managing their estates and their farms or whatever it might be. So that was, again, a fascinating period to work on a technology change within that part of the business that was super, super different. Because I was kind of used to being in an environment where people wanted the tech, was really interested in the innovations. Whereas at National Trust, it was a bit more mixed in terms of some people were very resistant and reluctant to use technology.
Okay, and then what next? Is this the big move?
Yeah,
next?
well, yeah. So I actually went back to shop the Littlewoods group for a period of time as well. Also did a very short stint at Nationwide Building Society, and then kind of got bored. At the time, I was a bit discontent at work, wanted to do something differently, and I'd applied for this job down in London with the very well-known JP Chase. And yeah, I applied for that job, didn't think much about it, and then pretty much within the same week, we had on the table in front of me, I had an offer on a property that had been accepted, and I had a job offer to go to London. And it was like, wow. I can remember the conversation with our partner who sat there saying, we've got like, it was that moment, you don't get many of these, I don't think, where there's very clearly two pathways. And it was like physically presented in front of me on the table. Got two pathways we can go here. And so, yeah, we made the decision to up sticks and move to London.
What would they do, your partner?
So my partner works for a university now. At the time, they were working for the custody team at Preston Police Station.
Oh, but so they had to move then?
Yeah. So
that's a big responsibility, that then.
Yeah, at the time we were in like rental property, so that was kind of easy. But yeah, we kind of spent this period of time where we had to move out of Preston. I moved first. She came about 3 or 4 months later. So there was a period of time where she was getting finishing a night shift at like 6 o'clock in the morning, and then getting the National Express at like 6:30 down to London to come and see me for the weekend.
Oh my God, that is love, isn't it?
She did that for about 3 or 4 months. Well, she was looking for a job, obviously, while she was still up in Preston. JP Morgan would never go to my school. They probably wouldn't even make it to Liverpool University, where I went to university.
There's probably only a handful of schools they want to visit.
Yeah, exactly. So I never really knew much about the business and stuff. And it was just one of them, in an evening where you just go on LinkedIn and you just firing your CVs across to multiple different roles, seeing what lands. So I can remember when I went for the interview. You turn up, it was in Canary Wharf. You turn up and you're like, where's the building? And you look up and you're like, oh, it's that one. And it was like, wow, this is... I remember I've got a very good friend that I worked with there as well. And me and him always joke about our kind of like working class upbringing and like thinking about working at JP Morgan and stuff. And we always laughed that when we first joined, we were most fascinated by the fact they had a Starbucks on the 7th floor. That was like, for us, that was like, you joking me, they've got a Starbucks in the office. That's incredible. So it was complete culture change.
Pretty different from Littlewoods, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
So, and what did you do there then? What did you do at JP
Yeah,
Morgan?
so I joined JP Morgan in the software development team. So
Okay.
they were looking for people that had experience of agile ways of working, and my experience at Shop Direct Group, another really at the Littlewoods place. The very good thing there was they were very into kind of rapid releases, agile ways of working. So that gave me a fascinating and really good experience of working in that way. So that's what, again, JP Morgan being a traditional organization, wanted people that had experience working in modern ways.
Yeah.
So that kind of gave me the way in, really. Even though I hadn't worked at like a financial company before, the team that I joined were actively looking for people that had different experiences.
And how long were you there? Quite a while.
Yeah,
wasn't
11 years, yeah.
it? 11 years, yeah.
What made it even more, I guess, crazy for me, coming from the north, moving to London, is the second week we got flown to New York for the week. So that was kind of my first experience of kind of business class flights, international travel. So I was like, wow, this is like 2 weeks ago I was in like rainy Liverpool, and now I'm in snowy Times Square on a business class trip, all expenses paid with.
I know. I mean, something else, isn't it?
It was
Business
like incredible, yeah. So yeah, that travel theme did continue throughout my period of time. So whilst I was there, I was lucky to travel pretty much all around the world, South America, India, America many, many times. So that was something I really, really enjoyed. And whilst what was interesting, the area that I worked on within JP Morgan was all around basically employee experience. So I worked on many of their internal platforms around how they manage their employees, recruit, onboard, self-service, intranet tools, all of that stuff you'd imagine for a company. And given their size, and their 300,000 employees, something like that, it's lots of work to do there. So it was fascinating.
Well, shall we skip to the good bit? So you left. I mean, what on earth made you leave a job that had a Starbucks on the side?
I know. So yeah, again, very stereotypical sort of COVID moment of COVID came along, living in a 1-bedroom flat in the centre of London. Everything was like switched off essentially. So that all the pubs were closed, the restaurants were closed, was working from home. I probably opened up a space in my mind of like reflection and time to think in a weird way. So that's where me and my partner then revisited the big questions in life. Are we going to have a family? Are we going to get married? We're going to buy a house? Where are we going to live? After many long walks around a desolate London, we eventually made the decision that we wanted to start a family. And with that, for many people comes the thing of like, well, where are we going to live? And we wanted to be near family. So made the decision that by starting a family, we'd also transition our lives back to the northwest, where we've got some wonderful grandparents who are involved in bringing up our son Dylan.
Nice.
For a couple of, probably 2 years, year and a half, was working remotely. Like most people working for a period of time. So yeah, working remotely.
Cake and eat it.
It was good actually. Start of last year, had the opportunity to leave the business. Took the opportunity at that point to leave, with the view that I just wanted more flexibility. Really, I wasn't living in London, so I didn't fancy commuting to London on a regular basis. So decided that for me, I've got a 2-year-old son. I wanted to be at home, and also wanted the opportunity to go and take a bit more risk and do something different. So I was at JP Morgan for almost 11 years, and I'd always had this aspiration to start my own business. I'd experimented over periods of time with like sort of side hustles and different ideas, and I've always had this kind of very entrepreneurial streak in me, but I'd never done it. So a number of factors came together in the fact that we kind of moved up north, had the opportunity to leave JP Morgan, and it just felt like the right time to go and experiment and try things out. So yeah, I made the decision to go and start my own business.
Did you feel like you were sort of prepared to leave? Had you sort of mentally thought what that would be like to not be getting, the salary, the benefits, the identity, the Starbucks, all of those things, that you were just getting and you'd got for 11 years and started to bank. Suddenly they're all going to go overnight almost. Had you started to sort of plan for that?
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's an interesting contrast in these two parts of my life. I go back to the one I mentioned earlier around being at that point where we had the house offer and the job offer on the table, where there was a very clear moment where it was like, decision needs to be made now.
Yeah.
With the shift to kind of self-employment and leaving the corporate environment, it was much more of a long period of time in which it occurred. Going back to when we said we were going to start a family, buy a house, move up north, then it was about having some savings. So there was probably like between probably a 3 to 4 year period where it was sort of like slowly happening, and then there was a final moment where it was like, okay, right, this is actually time to make the actual change to leave. Experimenting with little side hustles and businesses, building up my LinkedIn profile. There was a whole number of things over quite a long period of time that were sort of planting seeds.
It's almost like you read my book before I wrote it.
No way.
No, but I mean, I think what you've done is exactly. In fact, I was just having lunch with somebody just before today and saying the same thing. They're sort of like, you can tell they've sort of got the itchy feet to go, but they're not ready yet.
Yeah.
Still got young kids. And the message I was just saying, prepare for this. And as much of the kind of like money and like, what would I do? It's about getting, reducing that dependency in here on that way of making money being the only way that you can make money.
Yeah.
And in his case, much like yours, the company is also making changes that may either benefit you if you're ready for it, or really hurt you if you're not ready for it. And that's I think the single bit of advice: you can't rely on these things, but also you can get ready so that when these two worlds sort of sync up, like happened with you, these two kind of ideas, the company wants this, you also want that, you can make something out of that. And it's great when that happens.
Yeah, I've always one of the principles I think I've lived by for quite a while now is about not giving up my leverage. So I've always wanted to be in a position where I have leverage over my circumstances. Often finances is an important leverage where you can kind of build up savings. But even simple things like my personal brand, I didn't want to give up, in the sense that I spent a lot of time over LinkedIn and at conference talks and a bunch of things sort of building my brand up and my network. So that gives me a bit of leverage as well, right? Where if I don't have the financial means, I might have the network means. I think during that 3 or 4 year period, very much focused on planting seeds or building leverage that allowed me to then make certain decisions that maybe if I didn't have that would have been challenging to do.
Yeah, well, they're all ways to just de-risk that final jump, aren't there? Yeah, I remember you saying you were going to conferences and talking, weren't you?
Yeah, very much like, again, it kind of tried to build that sort of brand with that view being it was really an investment for when I made the decision to make the change. The problem I think I felt at the time of like using that metaphor as planting lots of seeds, investing in kind of my leverage so that I could eventually leave, it felt like probably that I'm mixing my metaphors here, but it's kind of like a tribute act. I felt like I was the tribute act, not the real thing. So part of it felt a little bit artificial, and I was wanting more. I was wanting to be the entrepreneur and that I'd always wanted to be, rather than just the guy that runs a few side hustles and does a few talks and does this and that. And I think I was also itching for the risk or the accountability that comes with actually saying, no, this is the thing now. This is I'm taking away some of that safety net to help create the pressure, accountability and stuff to make it real, so I don't feel like a tribute act. I'm now doing the real thing.
That is so interesting. And even just that language, I think is really interesting, tribute act there, because it doesn't sound as positive, does it, tribute act? But it sort of reminds me of something I've noticed several years later after having left, which is I feel like this is the real me. And that is really similar to really what you're saying. The one that was doing all that stuff before was a bit of a shadow of me, really. I don't look at that person and think that person was both firing on all cylinders, but also getting the recognition of what he was capable of and the sort of potential that he could have added, and therefore the opportunities. Whereas now, shackles off, but also comfy slippers off, I feel like there's more. This is more me now, in a way that I'd never really thought at the time that I was almost losing out by being there. I thought it was fine there, but now I reflect back, I think it was hot. It was kind of just. It's almost like a bit like a window that's really foggy. You can't really see. It was like it was showing that side of me rather than the clarity that I think I show now. And it's so interesting. You're sort of saying similar things.
Yeah, no, I definitely resonate with that. That kind of like, I definitely felt that kind of split personality, that kind of duality of there was like one part of me that was doing this thing, and there was another part that maybe wanted something else, and they weren't whole. Since leaving, I would say I've still not kind of fully, you've obviously been at this a little bit longer than me now, but I've still not closed the gap fully. When I left JP Morgan, one of the real mindset shifts I've been making or still going through is shifting from an employee to a business owner. That was quite a big shift that a realization I had very soon after I'd left. It was like, I need to start thinking about this as a business now, not as an employee. So that's been a big shift, and I think that's part of my identity change now, is moving to be Toby, the business owner and entrepreneur, versus Toby, the employee or senior manager or director or whatever it might be. When I started on this journey, I guess there was a few paths. One of the paths I could have gone down is done like more traditional consultancy work, sort of training and things like that. But and that would have probably given me some more immediate return and income on my work. I could have got some part-time role, fractional work, consultancy work. But I've kind of made the intentional decision of trying to build a tech product which is higher up on the risk curve and might be longer term, take longer to get returns. But what I'm finding is that I'm loving building stuff. I'm really enjoying that process of actually building something rather than just selling my time for money. Whether it will yield returns in the future or succeed is completely unknown. But that's kind of one of the things I'm trying to remind myself at the moment is, as long as you're enjoying it and having fun, some of that leverage I built around sort of financial security and stuff is kind of giving me a bit of a runway to do this. So that when I look back in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, I can at least say at that period of time, I had fun, I enjoyed it. Hopefully it also had some impact, rather than just kind of thinking that was just, I just shifted from a job into another job and didn't take that chance to do it.
I totally agree with that and recognise it myself. And I've felt a few times, if I'm not careful, I might as well it would be a lot easier just to take a job. If I'm working, nearly every day, I'm working hard, why just not make it a lot easier for yourself and just get a job? And so that was a whole motivation in getting the book done last year, because I just thought I want to have something I can point to besides just like, I earn money. And I think it's the same here for you with this product you're building, which I do want to talk about in a sec. But have you given yourself a time frame for that before you say, right, now I'm going to turn to other sources of revenue that might yield?
Yeah, at the moment I'm taking it like a quarter at a time. So I have some goals in terms of increasing the number of paying customers for like this quarter. But I'm very aware of the the longer time goes on, the more the sort of sunk cost fallacy will come into play. This kind of thing of, I did a post probably a month or so ago about falling in love with my product. Being a good thing and a bad thing, in terms of once you fall more and more in love with something, it's harder to give it up. So I definitely feel that kind of sense of the longer I work on the product, the more likely I'm going to fall in love with it and be difficult to give it up. So I don't know where that's going to go. And also this, going back to that thing around like patience, I'm probably more on the thing of, I'm probably going to be less impatient because I'm a bit of a productivity addict. So I'm probably going to want to kind of move quickly. And if it's not moving quickly, I might end up giving it up. Whereas it's that whole thing, if I just gave it a little bit longer, I succeed. I think in terms of this kind of transition or phase I'm in now, I've kind of, I guess roughly in the back of my mind, give myself a 2-year period where I'm kind of like got enough financial stability, and sort of in my life situation with my son and my family's kind of next 2 years is kind of like a period that I can sort of experiment with. And then at the end of those 2 years, be kind of more of okay, there's kind of bigger decisions here now. If it hasn't succeeded, do I go back into work? Do I do something else?
And I think that's why what you said earlier is so important, that you enjoy that period. Because yes, you may go back to that starting point. So the worst thing you want to do is just look back and regret that. You actually want to go, well, even if it didn't work, that means, even if there were moments when I just thought it would have been easier to just have stayed in the job and held on to the pension, whatever. It doesn't matter, because actually I really enjoyed that. I grew in that period. I expanded my network. I met some really interesting people that might be useful or interesting in the future to whatever I decide to do. And, I think generally speaking, people don't look back and regret things like this. Mm-hmm. They can nearly always draw positives from a change. I mean, you might think there are times when you look at your pension and think, oh God, if I'd stayed there, it would have been a bit higher than this. But I think very quickly you would start to add in some other things you've gained that make that less valuable anyway.
Yeah.
So I think it's human nature in a way.
Yeah, no, 100%. So
tell us about the business, because I think it's super interesting, and I particularly like this link with what you did in JP Morgan too. So it's a build rather than it's something completely different.
Yeah, so product I'm building at the moment is called RealTalk Studio. And we are in the business of making hard conversations easier with AI. So basically provide AI-powered role plays to help people practice, perfect challenging conversations at work. So we kind of say we're helping people build confidence and skill for the conversations that matter.
Yeah, I absolutely love this. And I could think of so many excruciating training sessions I had as a team leader to have performance conversations, difficult conversations with people. And, I didn't mind the actual learning about it, but I really hated doing it in front of other people. So the idea of having a robot to do it with that can give me real-time feedback, I think sounds amazing. And I can just imagine tons of use cases for this in big organizations.
Yeah, 100%. Like, common one is obviously like in a leadership setting, maybe you're a first-time manager, doing your first end of year reviews, or maybe you've got some conflict within the team. That kind of helps you just role play those different scenarios. And really, I think, like you said, we kind of focus on confidence and skill. Confidence is the case where often we know how to have the conversation. It's just like we just need to practice. So we say we're kind of digitizing the mirror. What's really nice there is the fact that it's just in time learning. You've got a conversation later that afternoon or the next day, and you can jump on and just practice a bit of what you're saying to kind of build the confidence.
Well, so how does it work then? Is it just real time, as in somebody's firing questions at you and react? It's
just like a very much conversation like this, video avatar. You speak to it and it responds instantly. It's not scripted, so it's all using generative AI to kind of guide the conversation, and the AI will just respond. So roughly the way it works is the two pieces of the puzzle. One is the role play scenario, which is like the characters, the scene, the context, the role you're going to be performing, the role the avatar is going to be performing. So you kind of set all that up. And then the second part is the feedback that you get on the conversation. So again,
that's what I was going to ask. So what is that then? What feedback do you get?
So you imagine a scenario with I am the manager and you're the employee. We're in our end of year performance review, and I'm practicing doing the end of year performance review. As part of that conversation, I want to have feedback around goal setting, showing empathy, and asking questions, something like that, right? The end of the role play conversation, you'll get feedback to say how well you did each of those and give you some tips on how you can improve, and then you can kind of go back and try again and improve. You can also do it where if there's a particular model the business had got of like performance reviews, or another example might be like specific feedback model. You can actually give it feedback to say you did or didn't follow the model and stuff like that. So it's very good from a training perspective as well.
Yeah, I loved it. And I told you, I saw the odd thing on LinkedIn when you were getting feedback from a really tough mentor, AI mentor. And I just thought it was absolutely amazing. I mean, the feedback was really,
it's
really interesting.
I guess they always say as a founder, you should be using your own products. So I'm actually using these products myself. I've used them to role play pitches, get feedback. I didn't use it for this podcast episode, but I should have tried it and Adam AI, and I could have practiced the podcast interview. So yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah.
So are you building the product yourself? Are you using tools to do it? You're using third parties?
Yeah, so
how are you actually doing this?
So the product, I've kind of been experimenting for a long period of time on various different tools. The thing that was the real game changer for me was a development tool called Cursor. It's very popular. You've probably seen it on Twitter. And basically, it's a co-pilot for software development. And you can literally just put into it, build me a role play tool, and it will basically bootstrap the tool for you really, really quickly. And that has just accelerated my progress dramatically because the speed of iteration is just so fast. The cost is so cheap, whereas in the past, probably people like me would have gone to like a third-party agency. So this idea, can you build it? Take weeks, months to build an MVP. This is literally the kind of thing of like weekend work, spin up an idea, test it out. And that's pretty much what I did, to be honest, over the course of a weekend. Put something together, sent it to a bunch of people. They were like, this is incredible. And then, I've just kind of iterated from there, really. This is like a role play training scenario. So it's not meant to recreate reality. I think there's still a way to go where these are actually feel very real and you can't suss it out. But that's not our intention at this point.
I think this is one of those classic kind of corporate behaviors as well that we need to really watch when you're running businesses, to just perfect things. Because I don't think the goal is ever to pretend this is a real person. It's missing the point, isn't it? Really, because if it's the real person, you might as well talk to the real person.
Yeah.
This is a practice effort. So you can imagine some people could spend hundreds of thousands of pounds perfecting this so it feels really real and totally miss the point of the user. I'm really interested in what you're taking forward from JP Morgan, maybe even experiences before. I love this idea that we're just building all the time on what we've got. It's not a sort of break at all. In fact, if it's a break, it's a real wasted opportunity of all that investment you've made in building who you are before. So what are you taking from JP Morgan elsewhere into this business, do you see? And why does that make you a different kind of founder, maybe a better kind of founder too?
Oh, this is a big question, this one. Why me? One aspect, probably, if I think back to when I was joining JP Morgan and I mentioned getting off the tube at Canary Wharf and looking up at this building, it was very much a very strong feeling of like an imposter syndrome and just like, wow, I didn't even know this stuff existed. Very much now aware of like most people working in these big companies are just normal people, so they're nothing special. And I think that's probably something I'll take forward in terms of when I'm having conversations with these big companies, is not being daunted by them and just the reality of they're just normal people working in normal businesses. So I think that's something that I'll take forward. That is, and by working in such a big, prestigious company, I don't necessarily have much fear of then going to have similar conversations, having a sales conversation with like a Goldman Sachs or a BP or any of these big companies. Whereas probably back then, if I'd walked into the lobby, I would have been a bit daunted now, but I'd happily probably go into the lobby of BP and sell my services, albeit with the thing I mentioned earlier around that kind of like challenge with self-promotion. I think that's more about some of the kind of social media stuff versus just being in front of people. I'm usually pretty comfortable then. But I think that's one thing, just not being aware that these are just big companies full of normal people.
They are one less normal person inside one now as well. So great. I think it's super inspiring. I mean, I think there's so many things to sort of take away for people around, around that jump, which I think many people really aspire to when they're sitting in a job. I want to go and be a founder, particularly kind of tech founder. I mean, it's such a sort of glamorous alternative to the sometimes drudge of being in a corporate job with a restructure going on and all the uncertainty. The idea of the autonomy of just running your own business, about building something really, really valuable, particularly, as I say, something that's a bit of a tech thing, especially AI at the moment, super hot. I think, you're representing something that's quite dreamlike in a way, but showing that it's accessible, and you're so down to earth that it doesn't feel like it's something you're BSing us on either, because you've been honest about some of the challenges of it too. So I hope it's going to really inspire people to follow your lead.
Yeah, and like we said, at the very worst, in a couple of years, if I've kind of kept that North Star of having fun, enjoyment, and having that impact, then if I decide to go to another corporate role or back to a company I've been at before, I can kind of look back and again, that was a big part of this that I'd probably finish with, is also the story that I wanted to tell my son. So very much becoming a parent was a big part of me thinking about that kind of legacy, and I just think about the story that I could tell my son when he's starting to enter adulthood, like how his dad's left a high-paying investment job to go do his own thing, and maybe going back to the other example, in like by that point my company might be valued at 2 billion, and it'll be a really crazy story. It isn't. It's just like the story of just taking some risk, learning, having fun, and making changes, because it so easily could have been at a company like JP Morgan for 20-30 years, as many people are. So
I think that's so true to have that, so good to have that as well, that sort of, as you said sort of before, about sort of meta view of yourself really as well. And, I was really struck when, before I left, I was telling my kids, giving them career advice, and I wasn't following it myself. I was saying, you can be anything, that's a bit puffing them up a bit, but, you can be anything, the world's your oyster. And then I'm trudging off to the job that I've been moaning about that they're seeing me. It's like, what are you doing? It's just, so to have, I think, you're right. Focus on your son and that story, but also, that sense of legacy too. I mean, I think it is a legacy. Like, you've got a better chance of that, building that really distinctive legacy by doing something like you're doing than being part of a cog. And I'm not knocking being a cog, but there's definitely a chance for you to have real impact here that would have been harder in JP.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Good for you. Brilliant. Well, look forward to hearing more and seeing more of these crazy AI avatars telling me I'm I need to up my game.
Now, it would be the big reveal now if I suddenly mic dropped and said, you've been talking to the AI Toby this whole time. That would be a good mic drop. And maybe that's something for a future, another podcast.
Yeah, you've given that away now. No one will do a podcast in case. Great. Excellent. Thanks, Toby.
Cheers, Adam. Catch you later.
Cheers. Bye now.
Bye.